Welcome back to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and one time I almost got run over by a truck. Today I'm chatting with Lila Martinez, an incredible storyboard artist who shares her journey from pursuing animation in Mexico and then doing whatever it took to become a storyboard artist in the US. Over the years, she's storyboarded on The Simpsons, American Dad, Netflix's Duck Duck Goose, among many other projects, and now she's a storyboard artist at Disney Television Animation. Plus, she recently was a panelist on the Latinx in Animation storyboarding session with Walt Disney Studios, which just happened last month. Now, in our chat, she's going to share how she picked up the specific skills she needed to make it in both feature and TV storyboarding, the differences between working on children's and adult comedies, how she's landed some really big roles over the years, plus the mentality she took to pursue and achieve her goals no matter what and with whatever resources she had at the time. Plus, her top tips to make your dreams a reality too. So now, without further ado, let's dive in. Hi, Lila. How are you doing? Thanks for coming on the podcast.
I'm very good, Terry. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, well, I'm really happy to chat with you because I think you have a really interesting journey and story. And, I love hearing more about storyboarding because that's something that I do all the time for my school assignments. So I want to pick your brain. But first, okay. I want to hear where it all began for you.
Well, it began in my case since I was a little girl, since I was, 7, 9 years old. I always liked drawing like any kid. I mean, every kid is an artist until they take it away. But it was one Sunday morning that I was with my siblings, really with the TV was just playing on the background. It's not that we were really paying attention to it. My sister was doing her own, she was at college at that time. She was doing homework or stuff like that. And they were playing Tex Avery special. And they were showing how a little bit about the animation process, how they study the movement and stuff like that. So they were recording a woman with a long dress, and the tail of the dress was going to be similar to the tail of a lizard. And my sister, she just stopped for a minute, looked at the TV, and she said, "Oh, wow, animation is really a true art form." And that just stayed with me. I mean, before that, of course, I loved cartoons, and I grew up with the renaissance of animation, and I watched the same Disney movie over and over again. But it was really Tex Avery special that made me realize that I wanted to do that for my life. Right after that, I went with my mom to a library, and to a bookstore. And they had this huge book, The Art of Walt Disney Animation. And my mom, I told her I wanted it, and she was very nice, and she bought it for me. And I started reading it, and it was so complex because, I mean, you think cartoons, you think it's something easy, and it's something that you turn on the TV and it's right there, either TV or movies. But when I started reading that book, and they were explaining about the pioneers of animation and the pioneers in Disney animation as well, and how they were pure artists, how they were highly trained in fine art, and how they will approach Da Vinci and Michelangelo and all the Renaissance masters into their own cartoons. So when I started reading about it, I realized animation is so much more. It is a pure art form than just simply cartoons, and I just fell in love with it. And I knew I wanted that for a living. Like every time from my classmates that you don't know what to do with your life, I always knew I wanted animation. But the problem was in Mexico back then, late 90s, early 2000s, there was no training. Actually, I didn't even know there was a career in animation until North American schools went to visit Mexico, and I went to that university fair, and I realized there was that you could study 3-4 years of animation just like that. But the problem is when I started researching the schools and the universities, they were impossible to pay for us because In Mexico, another thing is we have a different currency. The Mexican peso is very weak against the American dollar or the Canadian dollar. And the schools are normally more expensive for foreigners than for locals, like UCLA and all those. I mean, they will have programs for the people that live in the States, but not for the foreigners. So there was no way. Like, there was a little bit of chat here and there with my father, but there was no way for us to afford that. So I did the closest thing, that was graphic design. So I learned to do a little bit of illustration, but it's mostly, I mean, logos and
in Mexico, you chose graphic design in Mexico?
Yes. Yeah, because you need to keep going. I mean, I knew I wanted animation, but there was no way for me to study it.
I think that's a really interesting point. First of all, I think it's amazing that one comment from your sister changed the trajectory of your life. But I mean, for me, growing up in Canada, even, and seeing the cost of places like Sheridan College, and that was a huge challenge. And I'm only attending now because, later in my life, I've worked for a decade and have some savings. But I get this question all the time from people who, they have this passion, and they, even from other countries, and they look at the prices and there's just no way. So I really want to kind of, you mentioned you have to keep going. So you chose graphic design, and I want to figure out what was going through your mind to choose that and go for it no matter what, even with those big obstacles.
Well, I knew I wanted to draw. I knew I wanted, and I thought the most commercial thing I could do was graphic design, but they really don't teach you drawing as much as I thought they were going to. And I always kept my mind in animation. I took a couple of classes here and there, but I mean, they really don't teach you. I did some animation with clay, and but they're all clunky. I mean, if you try to learn animation by yourself, I don't know who's able to do that, but I wasn't able, although I tried hard. And it was in college, because at some point I thought, okay, what's stopping me? And the money was it was really what was stopping me. I thought, okay, I need education, and how can I get it? I need to pay for it. And it was in college that I met one guy that he mentioned about Vancouver Film School, that is a 1-year intensive program. So I researched that school, and I was, okay, so maybe 1 year is more possible than 3 or 4 years that includes rent and food and everything. So I'm like, okay, so the goal seemed a little bit more reachable if I go to that school, but still I didn't have the money. I called the school, they told me, we don't give any scholarships, so you have to pay in advance. So I was like, okay, so there you go, right? And then I met also in college a woman that a very cocky girl that she was a model, and she was saying how much money she was making. And when I looked at her, I was like, well, she's not that tall, she's not that pretty, she's kind of bland, and she's making all this money. And I was like, okay, maybe that's the way that I can do it. So I started again. I went by myself. Like, nobody told me how to knock on doors, like how to prepare the photos and everything. But I started like really raw. But I modeled for about 2 years, and I saved every penny to pay for Vancouver Film School. And I did it. I was able to pay for the tuition. I moved to Canada to study for that year. And when I was there, I couldn't believe it. Like, the first days I was like, I really did it. Like, something that I thought it was unreachable, and I really did it. And after that, everybody that was graduating, they were getting a job right away, like right out of school. It was a great time. So you get your hopes up. It's like, okay, maybe I after this I will get a job. But then it was the end of 2007, and the 2008 crisis hit, and it hit the US, and it also affected Canada. So even my teachers lost their job, and they were amazing artists. So there was no way for me to compete against them. So
I'm just wondering, when you were in school, like, you had so much passion and drive, and you worked so hard to take this 1 year intensive course. Did you notice a difference between how you were studying and maybe other students were studying who didn't have to work so hard to get in? Like, I'm just picturing you like going so hard at it in this program because it mattered so much. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was definitely, I was one of the hardest workers on my class. My class was kind of mixed. It wasn't that, I think the youngest one was 18 and the oldest one was 30. So it was a good mix. Most people, honestly, most of us, we had to work before to save the money to pay for Vancouver Film School versus a kid from the UK that his father paid for it, and he kind of felt guilty that it was so hard for us to pay for our education. But every story is different. And the class above me, they were in their 40s. Like that was a class that they were older people, and the class before us, they were very, very young and they were kind of a mess. So every class was different. Wow. But yeah, definitely you can tell the people, even the classes when they graduated, we attended one grad and the short films were so crappy and we got afraid. We were like, are we going to grad with that? Like that ugly piece? But then the teacher told us that that class, they didn't follow instruction properly and they were kind of lazy. So that's what you get. If you want something good, you have to put the time and the effort.
Yeah. So then the 2008 crisis hit, and what happened to you?
So I had to go back to Mexico, and then I hit a wall, and that existential crisis that you don't know what to do, because it's okay. I had a goal, I got it, and now what? Now what do I do? Because in Mexico there was no animation industry, or it was very, very little. But there was a project. There was a famous stand-up comedian, and his son, he used to do web design. So he created this project of animating the jokes of the stand-up comedian that he recorded back in the 80s. So I contacted them and I went to visit the office, and they were like, okay, you're hired.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it was really nice. So I was there for a year and a half until, the thing is, this comedian, he became famous because he will make the jokes longer and longer and longer. So at the end, they were impossible to animate, especially for just one person. And VFS, they trained me well because I did everything. They will only give me the recording, and I will do the character design, background design, storyboard, animation, and I will deliver the final piece.
Oh, wow.
It was one of the partners that talked to me, and he told me that you didn't sleep last night, you didn't sleep for 2 nights in a row, so you can't keep doing this. Like, if you keep doing this, you're going to end up in the hospital. I love you, and I love that you work for us, but we ran out of material that is possible to animate. So I had to leave, and it was a job that I really loved doing. So I left that place, and something better came up. I mean, you always keep networking and meeting people. And a guy told me, oh, I'm working on this movie. Why don't you come to visit the studio? So I went to visit the studio. They were working on a traditionally animated movie, and they asked me, do you have a portfolio? I had my website. Like, I really didn't go to ask for a job. And they told me, okay, so can you start tomorrow? So I also got that job very easy. And they were at the end of the movie. I worked there for a couple of months, but still I went back to animate on paper, and that was great. After that wrapped up, I started getting freelance jobs. And then I created my own brand, and I made a service bureau. I ran my own company with a partner of mine. So we did a lot of commercials, and then Vancouver Film School, they offered me a scholarship to study CG. So
wait, they said they don't do scholarships.
Yes, but later they realized it was a good, after they started doing scholarships for anniversaries, like if it was the 20th anniversary or the 25th anniversary. So they offered me half of a scholarship to study CG. And I realized, well, now the world is CG, so maybe I should study it. And I went back. That was 2012. I love animation, but the technical part of rigging and the IEIs is just really not for me. Like I really wanted to blow up the computer. But I do realize in that time that story was my strength, because even classmates came close to me to ask me, hey, what do you think about this? How should I tell this? So they realized that I was good telling stories. Again, immigration is it's a little bit about timing. So back then, again, they were not hiring foreigners because Canada was giving back taxes if you hired a Canadian. So
Still
technically,
like that.
so if they hire a foreigner, they lose money. So it was harder to get, and so I couldn't stay again. I went back to Mexico. Fortunately, my clients, they were still waiting for me. They still like my work, so I came back with the same clients and more clients, and the company kept growing. We kept getting bigger and better projects and better paid, but there was something missing. Like, yeah, I was paying my bills, but I was not totally fulfilled. And there was one day that I was making a storyboard for a Fritos Lay commercial about peanuts. And I was talking to my client on one hand, and I was drawing with the other one about the changes that, I like the skirt red. Now I want it pink. Now I want it blue. I was like, this is going to be film. Like you can choose the whatever color you want the day you film, but you have to do the changes they ask. So that day I realized this is not working. Like something is missing. And I started researching like how to do a proper portfolio, and I ran into a blog of a teacher of Vancouver Film School that she used to teach storyboarding. And funny enough, she wasn't my teacher. She taught after I left. But she left a very good advice. And she said, find the thing that you are really good at and aim for that first instead of what you want. Like if what you want and you're good at is the same thing, then you rock, and that's awesome. But if you're better at something else, aim for that as long as you put your foot in the door.
Could you clarify like what you're good at versus what you want? Like what is an example of what you want?
I thought I wanted animation. I thought I wanted to be an animator, and I love animating, don't get me wrong, but I'm way better at story.
Gotcha.
Like story is really my strength. So when I read that just like a piece of a puzzle just find its place, I was like, yeah, I'm better in storyboarding.
I like that, because what you want is kind of just a fantasy, right? It's not reality in the present. It's like a goal that you think you want to work towards.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah. But if you're good at something, that's like a strength that you have right now that you can focus on, that can potentially lead to that thing that you want as well, or to a different path. Like you said, you wanted to start off animating, and now, are you doing much animation now? I know you're doing a lot of storyboarding.
Well, now storyboarding has changed a lot since the software allows you to do a lot of stuff. The studios, they want you to do more stuff. Like the software idea is for you to save you time, but they will ask more and more. So now a lot of studios, they want you to basically animate or key pose the characters. So I think I have the best of both worlds, because I still feel that I have the fun out of it. Because animating, like CG animating, when you do the key poses, that's the fun part. But then when you polish the movement, is so boring. Yeah. So the key posing is fine. But I haven't animated since, maybe 5 years was the last animation I did. I've been focusing more on camera and storytelling. And also, when I was doing one of the movies in Mexico and I was an animator there, the story wasn't good. And no matter how good of an animator you are, you won't be able to fix it.
Yeah.
And the story for me is everything. I mean, obviously the performance and the art and the colors, but if the story is not there, you're really not going to have a very good movie. And you have very little power as an animator, but if you are a story person, you can really make it better and you can really make it work. So it was like a little bit added to another for me to be where am I right now. So going back to that blog, I focused everything on storyboarding, and there was this conference in LA in animation. So I built my portfolio, and also a friend of mine, because I was debating if I should put a table or not. And what he told me, I told him, the thing is, I'm not ready. And he told me, you will never be ready. You will never feel ready. So he told me, just go. Like, if you have a crappy portfolio, go and show your crappy portfolio and you will get good notes out of it. So I followed that advice, and I met a lot of people that gave me a great feedback, and I met my producer for the movie that I moved to LA. She was a producer on Shrek, and she saw my portfolio, and honestly, she didn't like it. And she said, oh, this is too TV. I need it to be more feature. And you really don't understand what they mean. So I just throw a couple of names of artists I knew. And she told me, oh yeah, I hired that one. I said, okay, so I'll aim for his quality. Let me do a test for you. Let me show you something aiming for what you're looking for. So she wrote her email on a piece of paper. And I came back to Mexico, I contacted her, and she did send me the test. And she sent it to me when I was on a trip. So I was like, shoot, my opportunity is going to go away. So I spoke up and I told her, I'm on a trip, can this wait? And she was like, oh yeah, no rush. Just make sure that you don't put more than 40 hours on the test. Like, it has to be a week of work. So I finished my trip, I came back to Mexico, and I put everything I had on the test, and I really pushed the story, because my drawing skills were not there, to be honest. Like, now they are, but back then they weren't. But I really pushed the story, and they really liked it. So she emailed me back, and she asked me, are you still in LA? Because I would like you to pitch the story to us. And if you're not in LA, let's just do a pitch, a virtual pitch, just using Skype, or it was Skype by then. And I said, well, I'm not in LA, but I can be. When do you need me there? So I took a plane and I flew to LA just to pitch her that test. And in that meeting, I met her partner, the other producer, and the director of the movie. So it went really great. Like, I was sweating before I entered that place. Like, I was so nervous. And
wait. So she offered to meet over Skype, and you said, I'll take a plane and meet you in person? That's incredible. First of all, I want to backtrack a little bit. So I don't know how many times, I've met somebody and been like, here's my art style. And they're like, cool, but it doesn't fit what we do. You took that as an opportunity to say, because you really, I mean, it sounds like you're a very driven person.
I really wanted it.
What she, to work with her and work on the films that she was making. So you said, give me your email. I will match a style of somebody who already works for you, because I really want to do this. And like, I'm just wondering how many times, I've come across people that are like, oh, cool, here's my email. And then you try to follow up and then nothing happens. So like, what made that connection extra special, I guess?
I think there is a thin line of being desperate and being passionate.
Yeah.
I was desperate, but I think she saw the passion.
Back and ask her.
She gave me the chance. She really she gave me the chance, and it was a good timing. Also, I knew, because I was investigating about the immigration for both Canada and the US, when I went to the meeting, she asked me, so what do we need to do? And I said, just leave it up to me. Like, I know exactly what type of visa I need. I just need you to sign this type of paper and that's it. So I made it easier for them, because every time that you talk about immigration, they get scared and they say no. So my advice is just get the job first and then mention that you need the visa, because if you put that first thing on the table, that's the kiss of death.
That's some good risky advice. So why did you take a plane ride and meet her in person versus over Skype? Why did you feel that was necessary?
I feel that an interaction in person is very different, and I felt like really pitching in person was going to give a different impression. Mm-hmm. So I looked at it as an investment. And every time I came to LA to the animation conventions, I also it's not that I mean, I was paying my bills, but I was not making a ton of money. So the way that I approach things is I will use my credit card and then I will pay it off and then I will invest in something else. And that includes my computer, my Cintiq, and these animation events. So I just thought about it like another investment, and it did pay off. But yeah, when I stepped out of that meeting, I was like, this really happen? Are they really going to hire me? And nothing, I mean, they don't tell you, oh yeah, you're hired right there. Like, I felt it went really well, and I felt it could lead to something else. And just the feeling that it went well, and the chance that maybe I could make it to LA was just wonderful.
Yeah. So how long was it between that meeting and them hiring you?
Honestly, not that long, maybe 2 or 3 months, no more than that. Okay. Yeah, I got an email from them and they asked me, so what do we need to get you here? I sent the papers that I needed. They put me in contact with their lawyer. I went to the embassy, got the visa, and I started working. Also, when she called me to offer me the job, she told me, we are trying to get this movie. So we have money for 5 months. And I want to be very clear with you. Like, I'm offering you 5 months of work. If we get greenlit, maybe it will get extended, but I want to be very clear with you. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll take it. And those 5 months, I ended up working for that company for 1.5 years, a little bit more of 1.5 years. Because then they had other productions, they had other movies, and they moved me around. So, and I thought, as long as I'm in LA, I will make more connections. I will knock on other doors, like they will see me in person and maybe I can stay. So also, I was reading a lot of books that we don't, as artists, we really don't read about business and how to take care of the business and how to take care of time management and money. And one of them, it says like, money is power. So I needed to make sure that I had enough in the bank to whenever I lose my job, I could survive. So I was very, very careful with that. And but yeah, I mean, animation, it comes and go. The jobs, it's not a steady job. It's really you have to love it, because it's not a safe life or a safe job to have. You really have to love it. So after the movies wrapped up, I knew we were wrapping up, so I started looking for jobs. And there was another animation convention, so I went there, and David Silverman from The Simpsons, he gave a talk. And then there was the meet and greet afterwards, and I was waiting in line just to get, I think they offered tacos, just to get some food. And I was with a couple of friends showing them my portfolio, what I was building to ask for jobs. And David Silverman was like 2 steps away from us, and he saw my work, and he stepped in and he told me, hey, that storyboard is really nice. And I said, well, actually, I'm looking for a job. And I gave him my card. So I found him on LinkedIn. Because these people, they are very busy. Like, they are not going to call you. You really have to chase them down in a decent, not annoying way. So I contacted him and he gave me the right person I needed to contact to the
What did you,
animation
so
studio.
you found him on LinkedIn and sent him a message?
Yes.
What do you say when you're trying not to be annoying, but decent, like you said?
Well, according to our previous conversation on this event, I would like to do, I would love to work on the show. Like if there is, who's the right person to talk to? Like really, I don't remember right now. It's been
Yeah.
so long. But yeah, just don't be cocky and don't be desperate and don't be weird. Like try to be as normal as
All
you
those things are
can.
very easy to be.
So he gave me the contact. I did the test and I was freaking out doing the test because it was The Simpsons. I grew up watching it.
Yeah.
And you kind of self-sabotage yourself. But I didn't allow that. I didn't allow my fears to interfere with the test. And I put all my heart in it and I sent it. And that was a long wait. But then they called me, we really liked your test. So we want to hire you. Then I talked about the immigration stuff. I went back to Mexico to take care of that. And yeah, I started working on The Simpsons. And what was challenging there is the storyboarding group, they were all directors, but me. So it's really hard to keep up to that, the quality that they're expecting. So I needed to work harder than anybody else to try to achieve the quality they were expecting. Then, I mean, TV is always complicated and sometimes there's a lot of movement. So a lot of people came back, a lot of veterans. So either I move to the layout department to stay employed there, or should I leave? So I asked for the layout test, and while I was doing it, I could have done it because I do have the skills, but I chose going back to that teacher. Choose what you're best at, and storyboarding. I really wanted to focus on it. So an opportunity came in American Dad. They were looking for a storyboard artist. So I applied, I did a test, and I got hired. So I decided to stay in storyboard rather to move to a different department because I was in Mexico. You have to, as I mentioned during our previous conversation, in Mexico, the more skills you have, the better, because you have to cover a lot of departments. But in the US and Canada, what they want is a specialist. They want you to do one skill very, very, very well. So I didn't want it to be going back to being a generalist and jumping from one department to another. So I was able to stay in storyboard, which honestly in American Dad is a little bit of a combination of layout. So nice. It did help that I studied to do the test on the other side. Yeah. And so I was in Fox for about 4.5 years in both shows, and then this new opportunity came of the Disney Junior show Chicken Squad.
Wait! Before I just have a question about the storyboard test for American Dad and The Simpsons. You said you put your heart into it, but specifically, what does that mean? Like the storyboard test. Before, you said you really tried to enhance the story that was being told because your drawing skills weren't up to par. But now that you had more skills and experience, what did you try to do? Like everything? Like, does it mean like characters are super on model, the key poses are amazing, the story has like extras in it? Like, what is a like we're hiring you storyboard test look like?
Yeah, well, by the time that I was working. By the time that I was testing for The Simpsons, I did have the drawing skills. After I drew a lot after being hired, and I love the characters, and they have certain rules to be drawn on model, and I had the book that tells you those rules, and I knew the show. I really knew the show, and I really loved the show, so I knew what type of storytelling they were looking at. They were what type of show I was applying for. In the case of, but you have to follow a script, different from features. On features, you participate more in the writing and the story, and you change stuff. When you deal with TV animation, especially adult animation, Most of the times the writers, they come from the Writers Guild, and that guild protects their job, and we as an artist, we are not allowed to change the script. Yeah. So whatever they give you, you have to make it work one way or another. So the script they gave me actually was kind of weird, but I found a way to make it work. And I knew exactly who the characters were, so I focused a lot on their personalities. And because I have a traditional animation background, I did a lot of poses, and I focused a lot on the acting. So they really liked it.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask, you know, you mentioned there's a difference between feature and TV, where in feature you can work with a story a little bit more. What are other differences? Like that LA producer said, this doesn't look feature. Like, what does that mean? Because I hear this a lot, like TV boarding people don't go work on features, and feature people don't work on TV. There's like a big difference, but I don't know, like, what is that difference?
Well, now that line is less sharp as it used to be, because now we have widescreen TVs. So now we don't have the 4:3 type of TVs, and now Netflix and HBO and all this network, they have changed the way we tell TV. So there are TV shows that they look like movies now. And basically what they're telling you that this is to TV and this is to, and we look for features, is they want it more cinematic, meaning they want to see, they don't want the shots to be that tight. They don't want the shots to be very symmetrical. They wanted like more open space. And honestly, a good trick is just to put black lines on top of the bottom, and that will make it wider, and all of a sudden it looks cinematic, although it's kind of TV, but that does work. It's really, when you apply for any job, you have to really know who's your client and what do they want. Even if it's a new show or a new movie, you really have to ask as many questions as you can, so you can understand what they're looking for, so you can aim for that. But I mean, American Dad, it's a quote unquote flat show, and that's what they want. And if you deliver, and I've seen people deliver these crazy shots to show off that they have the skills to do it, but that's not the show. So they don't get hired because they are delivering something completely different. So yeah, it's really understanding what they want.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense, and thanks for clarifying. I can totally picture what it means to be more cinematic with your shots versus tight and symmetrical for TV. Mm-hmm. So sorry, continue where you left off from American Dad.
Yeah, well, now I'm on. I mean, I was in Fox for 4.5 years, and now I'm on. I'm a permanent resident. Finally, it took me 6 years to get the green card. So now I'm able to move around, which I couldn't. Also, I lost a lot of jobs in between. There were some studios that they wanted to hire me, but at the end, when we reached the conversation of the visa, I was like, yeah, we can't do that. Yeah. So I let go a lot of opportunities of a lot of projects that they were quite cool, but I mean, it was what it was. And but now I really love the show that I'm working on. It has so much heart and it's so fun to work in. And also it's a challenge because it's a difference. I came to LA to work on a CG movie, and then I moved to 2D TV that is still hand-drawn. And now I'm going back to a CG show that the difference between a movie and a show is on a TV show, you have to kind of recycle locations, or you have to know, like for example, The Simpsons, although it's 2D, you know what the house is and how the kitchen looks and how the dining room looks and where each character has its room. And so you have to know the map of the house. In CG is the same. It's even harder because you can't cheat. In 2D, you can stretch things, you can add stuff. In CG, you have to work with the assets that you have. So you have to be smart about it. So it was kind of not learning because I already knew CG, but it's just rewiring your brain again to tell a kid story versus an adult story, and you have to be more clear for children than you are with adults, and to understand how this world works. But it's been a lot of fun. Like I really love it, and I'm working with so talented people that I admire. So I feel very lucky. I don't know how long this is going to be, but so far, today I'm happy, and we'll see after this.
Well, I think it's amazing your whole journey and how far you've come, and I feel very proud of you. You were very driven, and you said you had a lot of desperation, but it came across to me as kind of confidence in pursuing what you want. And sorry, my question about the CG right now, are you still drawing the storyboards by
Yes.
hand? Okay. So you have to be pretty particular in how the measurements, I guess, in how it relates to what the actual assets are in CG land.
Well, in 2D, there's the draw on model, like mantra. And it is very important because now it's normally animated. The US, there's very little animation here. Mostly it's going to go overseas. So Fox normally send it to Korea to 2 or 3 different studios, and you have to be very clear. And if you draw off model, it's going to come back off model. So you have to be very, very picky, and they are very, very picky. In CG, it's not that important to draw on model because you have the models, like you already have the puppets, the CG puppets, but it is very important, the sizes, because I can make a storyboard that, yeah, it looks cool, but then when it hits the layout department, they can't match what I did, because maybe, I don't know, if the character is holding a piece of paper, maybe that piece of paper was supposed to be 3 times the size. And if I don't do that, then how are they going to place the camera? And you're going to run into trouble. So you have to be a little bit precise with the sizes, not so much the characters, but also the expressions. They have to be clear. You have to pick and choose. What I focus on is on the expressions. Like the body can be a little bit rough, but as long as you have the eyebrows, the eyes, and the mouth kind of clean, it's enough. But the sizes and the perspective is very, very important, no matter what media you use.
I also, that's really informative. Thank you. You explained it in a very visual way too, so it helps me. I'm also, you mentioned before, in Mexico, you have to be a generalist to survive as an animator versus specialist. It almost sounds like you've become a generalist within a specialty. Like you can do kids, you can do TV, you can do feature, you can do adults, like CG, etc. So I mean, obviously you've chosen one path. What do you think would have happened if you got that layout job on American Dad instead of, or was it The Simpsons? American Dad, instead of choosing storyboard?
I will probably still be there. I think I've met 2 type of, I think the artists, you can divide them in 2, the ones that they want the steady job, and the ones that are crazy enough to keep struggling like myself. I think I would have left at some point. I mean, having a 9 to 5 type of job and steady, and your health insurance and being able to pay your bills and your mortgage is fine. But I left everything in Mexico to pursue my career. The other day I went to the dentist, and I was a new patient, and they told me to fill out like my nearest relative, and I left that blank. And they came back and they told me, why didn't you fill this up? I was like, because my nearest relative is my sister, and she's in Mexico. She's in North Mexico, but she's still another different country. Do you want that? And then she went to ask, and she said, oh no, that's fine. And I realized, yeah, I'm here by myself. Yeah. Because I'm doing what I love, and I chose my career. And if I do the same thing every day without feeling that if I don't feel that I'm learning or growing or something, I feel that I'm going backwards. But that's just me. I have so many friends that they've already retired because they had such a steady job at Fox that they are enjoying their retirement, and they're very happy. But it's up to everybody. Like, we're all different.
Can you reflect on, because you mentioned sacrifice and, you know, coming from a different country, being away from your family, being alone in America, can you reflect on the things you've had to sacrifice to pursue this very strong passion that you have for animation and story?
Well, my mom definitely. Now she has changed. In the beginning, she wanted me to fail, and she was honest to tell me that she wanted me to fail so her baby will come back home. Same thing with my dad.
I guess that's a sweet sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, but
I hope you fail if you stay here.
you know, even my dad, when I was going to board the plane to go to BFS the first time, he told me it's okay to quit, and I was like, hell no! It took me 2 years to save the money. I'm not quitting. And he gave a big talk with me, like, you're wasting your money, and 2D is dead, but it's your money. Do whatever you want with that. Like, he really didn't wanted me to pursue it because he knew, at least back then, there was no future in Mexico for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now the industry has changed in Mexico a little bit since I moved to LA. But obviously it's still not Hollywood and Disney and Warner's. You only have that here. Yeah, I even sacrificed a relationship I had. I dated that guy for 15 years and we were together and it didn't work out. So I tried, but he wanted something else. He wanted like a housewife, which I'm not, and that was one other of the sacrifices. But to be honest, I'm very cool right now. I have a boyfriend that supports me a lot. Like, he's my champion, and he also comes from animation. He's a writer, and I show him sometimes my storyboard. What do you think? And he gives me good feedback. He actually gave me feedback to come here. We were friends before. Yeah, that was one of the biggest sacrifices, to leave that relationship. But it also taught me that there's something better. Like, if there is something is not working for you, don't be afraid for change, and something better will come up. People that are in one studio, that are fortunate enough to be in one studio for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, every time that the movie's wrapping up or the show, you don't know if it's going to get renewed, they're freaking out. They're so afraid, like, I'm going to lose my job. And another thing, if you stay in one place, you get, normally, depend on the contract, you will get a raise every year. So if you leave, you need to get normally you will need to get a pay cut, or if the show gets canceled, whatever next gig you get is not going to be the same amount of money. So people get really afraid. And there are artists that they can only draw Simpsons, or they can only draw American Dad, that they can't draw anything else, or they can't tell a story in a different way. Being a generalist in Mexico, I think it also shaped me, as you say, to be able to move from one thing to another. So I can jump back and from TV to feature, and from TV type of staging to more cinematic, and I like it. I like the change. I don't like being bored.
I really like what you said about, if you are kind of unhappy where you are, don't be afraid of change, because things can get better. What gives you the courage to make a decision that goes along the right path to making a change towards what you want?
We all know what we want, and honestly, you just need to be honest with yourself. When I was doing the layout test that I never finished, I was staring at my monitor all day because I really didn't want to do it. And I asked myself, okay, let's imagine that I finished the test. Let's imagine that I got the job. Am I happy or not? And I knew the answer. Another technique I read in one book was, if you don't know what way to choose, pay attention to your body. Like, imagine that you get option A. How is your body? How is your body reacting? Is it tight, or is it just relaxed? Now think on the other option, and you will know. Like, we all know, it's just that we lie to ourselves most of the times, and we're afraid. We're all afraid.
a lot of the time, like for me, I have to remember to do, I often, I like doing the first option you suggestion where I kind of project the path that happens if the option A happens and am I happy? But sometimes I get so caught up in what I'm doing, I don't even bother to think about doing that. And I just feel anxious about what's happening in the moment. So,
Well, you have to, I focus on my day-to-day work, to
yeah,
be honest. And sometimes my boyfriend is like, you should start looking for another job because you don't know when this one is going to end. It's like, yeah, let me finish this deadline. Like, obviously, what's more important, focus on that first. Like I focus on my day job every day and most of the time. And then if I have extra time, then I focus on the future. But I mean, your day to day, if you're happy, just focus there. It's fine. What you're doing is fine.
so let me ask you, what is kind of the ultimate dream, I guess I could ask of you, because you said you have the best of both worlds right now. You have story and animation, a mix of both. You're working on exciting things, learning every day. You know, you've come so far, sacrificed so much, and accomplished a lot. And I think that's amazing. So what is there something that you still want to progress towards?
Yeah, back in the day, if you asked me this years ago, it would have been being a feature 2D animator because I just loved it and I loved the paper and I loved animated on paper. But that's pretty much gone. There's some people that they still do it, but it's not what I dreamed about. Um, Now because I'm good with story and just like my classmates approach me to push their stories. Some professionals here, like previous directors or writers, they have told me, you're very good at story, you should write your own stories. So right now I have a project that I have like three, but I have one that is my baby. So I'm researching about it and I'm writing the characters and I want to pitch it, and with some luck, I will be able to sell it. If I don't sell it for TV, then I can make a graphic novel. If not, I will make picture books. But the ultimate goal is to keep telling stories, and as long as I can hold a pencil, like I want to keep doing stuff.
Keep telling stories as long as I can hold a pencil. I love it.
Yep.
So you mentioned if I asked you this years ago, you would have said to animate on a 2D feature film.
Yes.
What happens if a 2D feature film that fits your dream pops up? Like
I,
why limit your dream to what is kind of a reality in the industry versus what you originally wanted to
what
be?
I originally wanted. Right now, I think I'm too old for that dream. And
No, don't
yeah,
do
no,
that.
I mean, I'm too rusty. Like to be a good 2D animator is years of practice. I wish somebody picks that up and bring the veterans and train new generation. And because it's a beautiful media, I mean, France still has it. Some parts of Europe and Japan, obviously, they still do it. Um, but I just love those classic Disney 2D. I just love them. I
So
think,
what about a movie like Klaus that came out last?
oof, I love it.
Because you know there are people trying very hard to make a resurgence in 2D.
Yes. Honestly, I think I will still stick on story.
Yeah,
It's just because I'm better at it. And I see the animators and I wish I could animate that way, but I can't. Or maybe I could if I put all my effort to it. But it's been so many years that I have really pushed to be a better filmmaker, a better storyteller, writer, storyboard artist, that my skills have just switched in a different path, and I'm happy. Like I really love what I do, so I don't think I missed anything.
gotcha. Did you ever, throughout your career, or even just since you were 7 or 9 years old, whenever you started this path, feel like giving up, or did you reach a point where you were very close to giving up? Because there's so many obstacles in your way. You know, you come from a different country, your family kind of supported you in a way they didn't want you to to pursue. You had to give up like relationships, years of your
Yeah.
time, money, etc. Like, how did you not? What kept you from giving up?
um Quite honestly, It was so unreal for me to achieve it that I don't know, it's not that I didn't give up. It's just like I thought I was never going to make it, to be honest. Until this day, I still feel that I'm just like grabbing it with my fingernails, that I still feel that everything can fall apart one day or another. I mean, even with the seat, with the green card and everything, now that gives me a little bit of a breather. But I always have the anxiety that I can screw up and everything can fall apart. Why I didn't give up? I almost gave up because of the relationship I have with my previous partner, because he wanted something else, and I almost gave it up, but I was miserable. I was totally miserable, and I ended up in a crisis. Like, what am I going to do with my life after spending all these years and time and money pursuing this one thing? Should I give that up? And it was a very stupid idea. Um, but it's really the love. It's part of who I am. So how can you give up of somebody that you are? Maybe you can detour a little bit. A friend of mine that is in the UK, I just recently spoke with him, and he didn't do animation for 3 years, but now he working very cool projects. It's okay to detour if you're tired. Another friend of mine, she was a director on The Simpsons, and I think she stopped working 2 years, 2 or 3 years, because she was fried. She was working nonstop. She was completely fried. And it's okay sometimes to take a break, and live life. Glenn Keane was also tired, and he had a trip to France, and it happens to all of us. That it's fine. It doesn't have to be every single day, but as long as you know that you're going to go back on track, if you still want it. There's people that probably they lose interest. I just love it. I really do.
Well, I love that. I was kind of reflecting on your journey, and I was actually in a conference once. It was a business conference where animation film unrelated, where Mark Hamill was a keynote speaker, and he was explaining his career and how he got lucky to land Luke Skywalker the role. And his take on the film industry and acting is it's like spinning a giant wheel thousands and thousands of times, and maybe one time it lands on that lucky spot, but you have to keep spinning it kind of to get that luck. So I'm like thinking back to your journey, you had that chance meeting with the Shrek producer, the Simpsons guy happened to be standing near you. Like those, obviously you're working very hard and spending a lot of time and effort and energy and years to get where you were. But those experiences, do you see them as, you were pushing to be in the right room at the right place at the right time as often as possible, versus if you didn't go to the animation conference, maybe things didn't work out the same?
If I didn't have the courage to show my crappy portfolio on that animation conference, I wouldn't be here today. If I didn't invest my own money and being in debt, trying to hit the right spot, I wouldn't be here. Like it was I gave another talk and they told me, so you gamble, and it was a very expensive gamble, but it did pay it off. What I will say to people out there, I also, as you mentioned, Mark Hamill, I've recently listened to the Breaking Bad actor, Bryan.
Oh my gosh.
Carlston? Bryan Cranston.
Bryan Cranston.
Yeah. He mentioned he really made it until he was 40. And he mentioned, I was like waiter number 2. And then when you are Steve, it's like, I got a name, I'm Steve. And it was really after years of being a character actor that he really made it. And now he gets a lot of opportunities and he's on demand. But he says, this is hard. And there's a lot of actors that they say, oh, I'm going to give it 1 year. And he says, I'm going to save you that 1 year. Like, you're not going to make it if you only say 1 year. I wish I had the possibilities to go to CalArts when I was 18. Like that's something I wish I had, which I didn't. I studied in VFS when I was 24, and I made it to, after I graduated college and I saved the money, and I made it to LA when I was 31. So you can't decide. I wish I had a success story at a younger age. I feel old. I see a lot of young artists graduating from all these different schools, so talented. But that was not my path. So don't compare yourself to others. Maybe it's going to take you a little bit longer. I feel that it took longer for me. But at the same time, when I reached it, I was more mature to have it. And I've seen people talking about luck, that they were lucky enough to go to CalArts at 18 and get a job straight out of school. And maybe they have the title, but they don't have the skills because they stopped growing, because they just said, okay, I went to this, or I mean, so many different schools. I went to this school and that's it. So I studied and that's it. And no, it's a never ending learning type of job you have if you want to be good and if you want to stay competitive. So all the blocks I had at the end just made me a stronger artist today. So yeah.
I really like what you said about, or I guess what Bryan Cranston said about taking a year to see what happens, because I also feel like if you take that kind of approach, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, because in the back of your mind, even if it's not in the front of your mind, you're still relying on whatever it is that you were doing before, and you're not relying on that thing you're taking a risk on. So, you know, at the end of the year, I can always go back to my other life. So what is going to push you to put all your eggs in one basket to really pursue that thing? I'm curious though, you know, you are continuously learning. What do you specifically do to enhance your story skills?
Well, in storyboarding, obviously, is watching a lot of films and a lot of TV. I mean, the time that I have left is to watch, okay, what's good on TV, what's good.
And you watch it with like a critical eye and take notes and things, or just to get it in your brain?
Both. Sometimes I watch it to enjoy it, but you can't really turn off that brain of yours. And then I watch it to study. Watching it to study is completely different, but you know what's good and what's not. And even a bad movie, you say like, how can they made it so bad if everything was there? Like they had the story already. How did they did it wrong? And I have so many examples that I don't want to get into. But you also learn from bad artists as well. Like, I'm not going to make that mistake. They took the heart away. They focus on the superficial instead of the drama. So you start to learn. There's plenty of books. There's plenty. I keep studying classes. There's so many different artists. And for me is, if I get one good tip out of each class, it's worth it. Although they're going to teach me the same thing over and over again that I already know, but they will tell me, you know, I approach this in this way, or I use this tool. Like everything helps. I read a lot, and there's so much out there. Like even this podcast, they're always just listening to the professionals, how they approach their shows and everything. You learn a lot. So yeah, staying in a cocoon by yourself, nobody is going to come knocking on your door giving you the opportunity of your dreams on a silver platter. That is not going to happen. You have to look for it, and you have to fight for it, and you have to keep being better and better.
I'm guilty of having that mentality in my business career. You know, I always in the back of my mind thought, oh, I love animation, and if somebody gives me the opportunity randomly, I can do really well. But nobody's going to come to a random person that isn't putting out anything and say, here's your opportunity.
You need the contacts. To make the contacts, you go to networking events, or you get, there's people that they don't like that and they get a manager, so they will pay that person 10% of their life forever and ever. but but you pay for their contacts.
Yeah.
There are so many different ways. It's just try one thing. If it doesn't work, try another one, and also be humble, because there's a lot of cocky people out there, and that they feel they're special. Like, honestly, to make it, understand that you're not special, and don't aim for the director position when you're 22. You need to get the experience. You need to work with different people. Take any opportunity that comes to you in the beginning, because that will lead you to another stuff, and you will meet people there, and those people will lead to another job. So just stay active, basically.
Nice. I maybe have one more question kind of based on that. So, how do you know your worth and where you're at in with your skills and where you're at, kind of like, if you're 18 or 22 or 30 or 40 or whatever, and how do you know what that worth you have is? Because to me, you study all the time, you have all these skills and experience, you are very driven. Like, how do you specifically know your worth when you go on a new project, or even on your existing project, compared to your other colleagues and animation directors or storyboard supervisors?
That's a tricky one. In terms of how much to charge, is in terms of money, you can check. In LA, there's the Animation Guild, and you can check the contract. And in the contract, there are the minimum salaries that you have to be paid. So even if you go to a non-union studio, you know how much people are making out there. So that gives you an idea how much at least you have to be making. Sometimes for me, is what I'm getting out of the project. Sometimes it's going to be more money, but sometimes it's going to be more knowledge, and the people that I work with, that is more valuable in the current moment than money. That's a tough question. Honestly, is to measure if you like the project, if you like the people, if you like the studio, and if you see yourself happy there or not. If you see yourself struggling either by money or by you have a crazy boss, or they ask you to work unpaid overtime, then it's not a good place to be. And if you're miserable, then it's not a good place to be, and you have to look for something else. Check with yourself. I mean, I know where I'm good at, and I know what I'm lacking, and I see artists that are better than me, and I just aim to be as good as them. You kind of know with years where you're standing. You know you're better than somebody, but you know there's somebody way better than you. And in terms of money, as long as I'm getting paid fair and what it's on the contract of the union, I'm fine. And also I understand that every year I make a different amount of money, and people that go into directing, they also go back to storyboarding. So sometimes you're going to be jumping from storyboard to director to producer to director to storyboard. So and each one of them, they will pay you differently. But also, if you are working as a storyboard artist with a director that was your mentee, because I've seen that happen, understand that in that particular project, he or she is the director. You're not, although you were a director before. So you have to follow direction, although you disagree with some of their choices. Understand what your position is and be humble about it. You will be a director later on, but right now you're a storyboard artist again. So it's complicated. That answer is kind of complex.
It's a complicated question, so that's totally fine. Is there, as we're kind of wrapping up, is there anything else you'd like to share for anybody listening?
I don't know. I mean, if you are like me, that you didn't have the chance to study in the school you wanted, in the time you wanted. Just find your own way, and you will get somewhere. Don't be close-minded. Sometimes the studio is not important. Sometimes the name of the studio is not important. Sometimes the project or the people that you work with are more important. Don't give up. Stay hungry and stay humble. I think humble, but no, again, it's complicated. You have to know your worth, but try not to be cocky, but don't let people step over you. I don't know. Try to learn things outside the animation world that makes your mind think differently. That has helped me a lot in business and in meditating and in my life in general. So also talk with different type of people, not just your animation peers. Don't give up. I mean, it's been hard. It's been really hard for me. I feel that it's still hard, but I love it. And if you love it as well, just keep pursuing it and don't give up. It's hard. It is hard, and it will always be hard. And one advice I got when I started is you have to be tough. In this business, you have to be tough. So I'll just pass you that advice as well.
I like it. And for me, like if something is not hard, then it doesn't feel worth pursuing almost. If it comes
doesn't taste the same.
Then I don't want it. I don't know why.
It's not as sweet. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the chat. It's been incredible to hear your journey and all the insights that you've woven into your story along the way. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Terry.
Yeah, and if you're listening and you want to get in touch with Lila or follow her work, you can do so by checking out her website, which is lilastory.com, and I'll include that in the description of this podcast. And thank you so much for listening. That's all for now. Okay, bye.